Good health doesn't just stem from physical wellness, but also emotional and spiritual well-being. Whether you're on a quest striving for mental clarity, peak physical performance, emotional resilience, or seeking the love of your life, our guest today has the expertise to guide you. He's a former NFL player, a performance coach, as well as relationship and love expert, and he's here to offer you a roadmap to a healthier body, mind, and spirit. This is the story of Lockett Performance with Bret Lockett. Bret, thank you for coming on.
CASPAR, thank you for having me. What an intro. I'm gonna have to steal that from you if that's okay.
It's the one thing that I do on this that's somewhat scripted. Like I tell everyone, like right before, I'm like, let's have a natural conversation. And then I read this off, but I do have input. I try to make it as impactful and short. So I felt that was, what yours could be.
Job well done.
Thank you, my man. Thank you. But listen, you started off, as an NFL player, then you had this transition into the business world, then into performance, then into love, relationship. What was that whole journey of yours like? Can you go into that and kind of the evolution of you?
Yes, it's so interesting when you look back at it, and I look back in my life. I think this is with everyone who really has lived a little bit on this planet, but it's almost like you're living past versions of yourself, and you're consistently transforming. And, I look back to me as a football player and I don't even recognize who I am, right? Who I was, I should say. And there's no way that this person today could go back and relive that life because I'm two different people, and I think based on where we're at in life and based on, our frequency, if you will, what we know about life, that's what allows us to live these experiences. And for me, growing up, sports, football, it was my world. It was everything that I thought about. It was everything that I wanted to become. And so, I was able to do that at a very young age, live out a dream that, most people will never be able to do. And it taught me some valuable lessons across the board in life, in business, in, finances. I mean, everything you learn in sports, you can apply to life. And it was one of the most profound, I think, experiences that I've ever had. It showed me I think the biggest thing I can pull from being able to make it into the NFL the way that I did, because I wasn't drafted. I was an undrafted free agent.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the Cleveland Browns after, my agent was like, hey, they're going to invite you in for a workout. And I went in with a vengeance and I just said, I'm willing to die to make this team.
Mm.
And everything that I did was in that vibration. It was a vibration it was an all out war, and I was willing to put my life on the line to be able to live out that dream. And I think that lesson I take into all aspects of my life, as well as, the friends and the people that I coach and help, is you have to want to change your life in order to be able to live a different life. And it can't be I just want to do it. It's got to be in your vibration, in your heart. Right. And when you reside there, that's when the real magic happens. But, jumped out of that. And fortunately, I was around some good business people. I had a really great manager while I was playing football, and they introduced me to the business world. And when I got out of it, I was like, I want to figure out how to be successful. I remember, I laugh at this, but I remember I sent a marketing proposal back in the day when I was, doing a bunch of business ventures, and the marketing proposal was to this top attorney in New York. And it literally was like, hi, hope you're well. Marketing budget. This is what we need for video. This is what we need for X. Thank you. Right. There was no deck. There was no explanation. And I laugh at that because we all have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us are afraid to start somewhere or restart again for the sake of being laughed at or ridiculed or just not being enough. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of my journey in that lane of not being enough. That was a part of this evolution of me just realizing who I really am. And that kind of got me to where I'm at today, going through the Tony Robbins and the Brendan Burchards, and then, meeting Stephen Kotler and becoming a good, friend of his, and sitting on the board of the Flow Research Collective. It all was this transmission and transition into where I'm at today, which is to really create magic for people in their lives.
Do you feel that all along the way, was it this idea that you were always manifesting, that you always had this hunger to sort of bring this into creation reality, or did you learn that along the way in a sense?
That's a great question. I think life is this this variable of understanding, learning about yourself, living into whatever that is. So for me, at a very young age, 3-4 years old, I was playing sports three times a year: basketball, baseball, football, soccer, you name it. And so for me, it was the manifestation of kind of growing up into myself as an adult and realizing that my innate gifts, we all have these innate gifts. My innate gift is in the world of athletics. I could pick up any ball, and I was probably one of the best players on the team in the country or the state. And that was my realization at that time, right? But once that chapter ended, I had to figure out what that new realization or purpose is for myself. And, I thought it was business. And so I jumped into that. And, it was this trek and this search of not just understanding business, but understanding why people are successful in business. And as I kind of climbed through that tunnel, I realized that a lot of people who are successful in business aren't really successful in life. Right? They may be divorced. They may not necessarily live the kind of lifestyle that I want. And, at certain times I was captivated by, the glitz and the glamour. I worked in private aviation, and a good friend of mine started a private jet company, over 12 years ago. And, I was able to, partner with him and help him grow it. And that was a lot of fun, but it wasn't a lifestyle that I wanted to live.
Isn't there that realization, like at some point in your life, you see these people we idolize, right? And we start to learn they're not perfect, right? And everyone's dealing with something. And I do think that in this day and age where we put up personas, we have social media, we, Photoshop things and AI and everything, we kind of always put ourselves on that level of competing, on that level of comparing. And that leads to some level of doubt, of unhappiness, of depression. And I think that that's a big trigger for a lot of people that are suffering out there from both health conditions and just suffering on a day-to-day basis of just symptoms of unhappiness, which truly is a symptom of some. How do you work with people to get past that? Because we live in a world that is superficial. We live in the world where we are constantly comparing ourselves, where we want more. What are like your first steps to try and work through that as someone that is an expert in performance, in this body, mind, spirit understanding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot there to unravel. And when I really look at the first step to take with anybody, it's finding grace. Finding grace within yourself and finding grace within your life. Because grace is this concept of simplicity. It's this concept of more doesn't necessarily mean better, right? Bigger doesn't necessarily mean better. And so when you work with high level performers across the board, their life is extremely complex at times, right? You've done well in life. You're moving all over the place. You got a family usually. And how do you take a step back out of that to look at yourself, right? How do you stop filling up your calendar because you're running away from the emotions that you need to deal with? And everything in life is emotional. Mm-hmm. It starts with the belief, and that belief becomes an emotion. And so you know that better than anybody. And so when you start working in this lane, in the vein of performance, the vein of relationships, the vein of love, every single relationship in your life is a greater opportunity to find love within yourself.
Is that where you normally start when you're looking at things from that perspective of helping individuals find love? Start with thyself?
You have to. You have to. Because there's no way for you to love anybody else if you don't love yourself, because your relationships are just a reflection of who you are.
Yeah.
Right. So when I'm judging, or when I have expectations, or when I'm fearful, or I don't like this person because of their hair, or I don't like this person because they said this, it's not them, it's you. It's you. Let's just get honest and get clear about it. But let's find out why it's you. Let's find out where that's coming from. And I can guarantee 9 times out of 10, it's not coming from you as an adult. It's coming from you as a child. It's coming from a parent. It's coming from, when you're in high school and something happened to you, it's coming from that. And so when we incarnate into this body, the first 7 years, that's where all of our genetics are turning on. That's where our DNA is starting to fire and wire. And if there's things that happen during those 7 years that turn off certain parts of who you are, you go into your adulthood living that same life, right? Living those same emotions. So that's where we start. We start on the emotional side. And usually the number one thing that we do to open up just anyone, because this is why I've, it's changed my life and why I decided to get certified in it, was breath work.
Mm.
Right. And I know you met my buddy Curtis, and he's the one who introduced me to it, Curtis Lee Thomas. And it changed my life. And there's no faster way in 30 minutes, 15 minutes that you can get to the core of an emotion or the core of an understanding of why you're feeling what you're feeling than to breathe. And it's why our world is so stressed. When you look at anybody who's stressed, that's angry, that's upset, and you just watch them talk, they don't breathe.
Mm. And we always shallow breathe, right? When you're in a sympathetic nervous state, which most of us are, fight or flight sort of thing, shallow, less oxygenation, the blood, everything starts to crumble, then fatigue, all these other things, right? And it just keeps cascading down. Is that also where you start with a lot of people? Because there's lots of places you could start, emotional, breath work, and it's got to be a holistic viewpoint. But are you always throwing that in the front and center of people? Like, how are you breathing? And let's get you to breathe better.
Yeah, it depends on kind of the situation we're dealing with in the very beginning. If someone's closed off, or I see that they're not able to realize their own shit, excuse my French, right? And I know that in order for them to get past the reality that they've created, the perception that they created, then we'll do a breathwork session. And after that, when the heart is open, the heart can do anything, right? But it's when the heart is closed off that we have trouble trying to pull this out. And so when you're doing traditional therapy and you're wondering why it takes you 10, 15, 20 sessions to work through something, it's because you're not actually going into your body. You're trying to get the outcome externally, where the inside is where the outcome comes. It comes from the inside out. It's kind of like the chi or the vitality in Oriental medicine. It's right. You have this prenatal chi, which is everything that's inherent in you, inside of you when you're born. And then you have this postnatal chi, and you feed off of your environment. You feed off of your foods and your liquids. But when you don't have enough prenatal chi, that's when the postnatal can take over. Right. And so we just need to reinvent and revitalize that chi inside of us.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to be said about these points you're hitting on, whether it is the emotional, mental portion, which so many, disregard, breath work, which again, so many disregard. Do you find that most people just aren't sticking to the fundamentals of what health is about, right? Like those fundamentals of connectedness, nature, breathing, sun, relationships, sleep. Everyone's running out and just being like, just give me the drug. Right? Which is so non-fundamental, not even essential. But we've kind of got it backwards, where we go to that first instead of going to those fundamentals, like going in the gym and doing some really strange little workout, like only like Mr. Olympia is like do, instead of just squats and like do a little running or moving or anything like that. Is that what you're seeing?
Of course. I mean, we as Westerners, we live in a very fast-paced society. Since the pandemic, everything has escalated. I'd say 4 to 5 times in terms of the speed. I mean, this year felt like it was 3-4 months compared to years in the past. And when you look at it, you got work, you got kids, you got, projects, you got passions, you have fun you're trying to travel, enjoy life. And it's easier to just pick up a pill and, take that every day than it is to go to the gym, to go sit in sun, to go take 10 minutes and meditate. Most people can't even turn out their brains, right? It's like, I'm trying to meditate and I can't. It's like, well, of course you can't, because you're worried about everything else. And that's part of what meditation gets you out of, right? But it's a lot easier to fix short-term or long-term situations with a short-term solution. And those short-term solutions are just Band-Aids. It's not a lifestyle, right? And for me, I've even had to go back to the drawing board and say, Bret, what do you have to do every single day to be able to live this life that you want to live? And it all starts with having a game plan, just like it started in football.
Mm-hmm. It seems like when I speak with athletes a lot, they get a lot out of the structure that comes with the athletic sport and all the training and everything, but they also get a good amount of command of their life and understanding that there are some sacrifices that need to be done to get to where you are. Do you feel in general that we've kind of given up? Like, it's something I know Darren Olean is called like fatal conveniences. It's really easy to do like the unhealthy thing.
Yep.
But if you're already ingrained in you, like, hey, the way to get ahead is like, you got to train, you got to wake up early, you got to push yourself, you got to be, completely dedicated to the sport to excel.
Yeah.
And then you just transition that to life and everything else you do. And it seems that athletes have at least a better chance almost at this level of success in other things as well. Do you feel that we've just made life too convenient and we avoid kind of the things that we know will give us kind of the level of success that we sometimes really ache for?
Well, Casper, I mean, when you look at, your phone and you pick it up and you say, what am I going to eat today? And you can literally Postmate or Grubhub it and have it there in 45 minutes. I mean, that's the life of convenience. That is literally what we're doing right now with our lives. We're making it as convenient and as easy as possible, because in a lot of ways in business, it's optimization, right?
Yes.
It's how do I do more with less? How do I create more time, free up the things that I want to do? And it's like, okay, cool. You just made your life extremely simple, extremely easy and streamlined, but yet you're still not doing the things that are required, the hard things that are required to get you to emotionally change, to get you to mentally shift, to get you to build new habits and routines. And that's the structure that football gives you at a very young age. Is like, I know I got to show up for practice. I know I got to listen to what the coach is going to say. I know it's not going to be easy, and I know I'm going to have to push through this, right? I'm probably going to have to hit some people really, really hard. So I don't, so I'm not taking the brunt of the butt, so it's like, there's a lot that goes into it, from the physicality to the mental, but it's really all mental. I have a youth training academy that I train youth high school football players, and in everything that I talk about is mental. Everything that I see them do on and off the field is mental. And I'm constantly belaboring, you got to do everything right, because how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I know that that's a very cliche saying, but we've heard it time and time again because it works. So, right, how you wash the dishes is the same way as how you play football. And how you play football is the same way you get into business. So if you're selfish on the football field, when you start running a company, you're going to be selfish to your employees.
Yeah, it all transitions there. And it is true. I see it so much in medicine that people just want the kind of the physical answers to things, but they refuse to touch on the mental, emotional, and they get almost upset because they think you're saying it's in your head. It's not that. And it is in some ways, meaning
Sure.
The disease is not in your head. The disease is real, but it starts in your head.
Yeah.
And that's where people kind of, mistake that. It's not to say you're making up the disease. No, you're creating the disease.
Sure. Exactly.
And I could imagine that goes for performance as well. For anything in life, you start in the mental aspect and it all comes out in the physical. And
everything in the world is mental, right? There's this great book called the Kabbalah.
Yeah.
Written by the 3 initiatives. And, the first rule in the, 7 principles of really alchemy or materialism is everything is mental. Mm-hmm. All life is mental. And when you realize that your perception is a reflection of what you see inside your mind, you realize that the only way to change the way you look through your eyes is to change the way you think, to change what you believe. But also, the only way that I've seen in my short time on this planet, and I'm just getting started, is the only way for you to change your life, your energy patterns, is to raise your frequency. Mm-hmm. There's no other way, because I can give you more information. You can become a genius intellectually, but unless you're able to raise your frequency, you'll never be able to change your life.
Yeah. And I want to go into some of like the ideas of raising your frequency, but I just wanted to go back to that point of you as an athlete pushing yourself to, certain limits and kind of making things somewhat uncomfortable to get ahead. Yeah. I had a guest on recently, Ryan Blazer from Test My Homie, saying that he had people he worked with that used to make their homes not easy to work with, not functional, meaning they would put the plates on the bottom where they bend over and get down to get them. They would have to walk further to do certain things, right? And they became very, very appreciative of things that were easy, but they put themselves in a little bit of a challenging situation.
Yep.
so that they could handle stresses better in life that when they came out later. And I find this hysterical because we do the exact opposite. We want everything delivered to us next day, like no inconvenience to us. And that does change how we're going to go out throughout life.
Yeah.
And so I think that again goes back to that point that as an athlete, as a young person who was in sports and had those challenges, that framed you for the rest of your life to kind of understand that it wouldn't always be easy, but it's worth it. The long term ahead of the short term, those kind of things. Now, if we go into this idea of frequency as everything, right? Nikola Tesla, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, look in the forms of frequency wavelengths. How do you raise your frequency in a world that, kind of brings it down, whether it's through fear, whether it's through doubt in yourself, through this idea of selfishness or shame, all these lower consciousness vibrations that lower. How do we step above all that and keep our frequencies at a higher rate?
What I like to say is your attitude determines your frequency. So if you want to change your frequency, the fastest way to do it is to change your attitude. But that's the hard part. How do you change your attitude, right? What attitude do you change it to? How do you know where to go? And for me, I've always had this need to push. I've always been a leader. Some people were born like that. Others are made, right? I've always been like that. And I believe that we all have certain roles that we're supposed to play in society. And as I've grown, I've started to see that pushing and striving for something that's not aligned with who I am and my higher purpose has gotten me to a lot of pain and suffering. A lot of pain and suffering, especially in the world of sports. Because the way that I lived my life as an athlete when I was in the NFL was to show everyone around me that I made it, that I was good enough. Because at the very deep root of who I am, and we'll talk about how I got there, is there's this deep fear of inadequacy. That has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with, where I was born, when I was born, and the time I was born. So understanding that, I started to realize that everything that I was doing was to please other people. And that's the fastest way to find unhappiness in your life. It wasn't until I realized that I started to change, not who I was, but understand who I was supposed to be.
Was it the realization that you were unhappy and going through some sort of pain that made you then see that this was not the path? Where did you find that kind of aha moment? Because I'm just thinking of other people that continue to relive this cycle of something they're not learning or just pain, suffering, unhappiness.
Yeah.
And just don't really have that pivot point to be able to say, this means I need change. In medicine and in kind of in this idea of health, symptoms are a little bell that say something needs to change. Something's wrong here, right? You got a little bit of sniffle, something's going on. Your body's reacting to it, but it's also a sign of slow it down, maybe, get some extra vitamin C, get some hydration, chill out, work on de-stressing. But in life, it's different. The symptoms are not so much physical as they can be mental and kind of spiritual. Did you come to that realization from that angle of like, hey, if I don't change, I will continue down that path?
Yes, I did. It was almost like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Because, I was out of, my last year in the NFL was 2013. So that was 10 years ago, literally a decade ago. And I went through that whole transition and got into the personal development side of just becoming a better person. And that helped, but it didn't solve the challenges and the issues. And it wasn't until I started to do breath work that I was able to really get to the bottom of that. It wasn't until, I had a medicine ceremony and did DMT that my mind was completely blown open. And that's when I started to realize that there was something higher than myself. And I knew there was something higher, kind of all along. I didn't know what it was, if it was God or this or that. But that experience brought me to the understanding that I'm here to give. I'm here to serve. And I'm here to be a part of the collective because that's what we're all here to do.
Yeah.
And that's what created this transmission of me wanting to serve in the way that I'm doing it. And I think it just took me a little bit of time to figure out how I want to serve. Right. Well,
That idea of like serving, of being of value, of having purpose, I feel like that is like at its core, just the ultimate gift you could kind of give to yourself to bring yourself out of certain places. Because I see it all the time, that people are either sick or this and that, and they're always looking for some kind of silver bullet,
mm,
whether it's the treatment that's going to do it, or this lifestyle change to gluten-free that's going to do it, or something in there. When in reality, it is that spiritual level of purpose that they're missing, and they
ah,
will continue to be in a lower state until they find that purpose. And so many people don't have that. So many people are detached and lonely in this world. And I was just seeing this posted on this study that loneliness, researchers say, is about 50. It's like smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's the same
mm,
damage you're doing to your body.
mm,
And it's not like you're doing anything physically wrong.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
loneliness, right?
Mm,
And loneliness now could mean you have a lot of friends, but you feel detached.
mm.
You
I've been
feel
there.
separated, right? I think we've all been there, but it's
Yep.
that chronic loneliness. And again, to me, that means you're lacking purpose. You're lacking that sort of, what do I give back to the world that connects me?
Yeah.
Because I could have people around me, but if I don't feel that, there is
Mm,
going to be this deep connectedness with everything around you. And I guess this leads me into a lot of your work. You've done the work to get to where you are now.
mm, yeah.
What are the techniques and things that you are applying with your clients to help them catalyze so they may not have to struggle like some of us did with our experiences and kind of get there faster?
Yeah. Everything for me is, everything that I teach, I've gone through.
Yeah.
Otherwise I won't teach it. And it was about 3 years ago where I was seeing a naturopathic doctor for, I had hamstring issues and wasn't healing. And, you get old and you're like, oh man, I can't run like I used to. And so I was talking to her about some of the challenges I was having. And she was like, you should read this book called Gene Keys.
Mm.
And I was like, Gene Keys? She was like, yeah, it's about, your DNA and, how your DNA codes into who you are. And I was like, well, it was so esoteric at the time. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay. So I bought the book and I had all these questions about life, the universe, past lives, where we come from, so on and so forth. And I picked this book up and it was literally like Da Vinci's Code.
Hmm.
I opened it and I couldn't get enough of it. And everything that I was saying was so true. I felt every single vibration in my body of the information that I was learning. But it was so much at the time, it was just like drinking out of a water hose.
Mhm.
And so I just started peeling it layer by layer like an onion. Just every day I would listen to a little bit. Every day I'd learn a little bit more. And then I'd have these experiences and I would relate and understand how it relates to me. And so eventually what I did is I ended up going through some of the courses within the Gene Keys. And then I ended up getting certified.
Mm.
And I use this system because this system gives you the fabric of a mind map or a roadmap into your level of consciousness, but exactly where you're at and where your gifts lie, where your passions are, what you should be doing for your life's work, what keeps you healthy. It's all in there.
Mm.
And if you decode it and you break it down in a very rational way, it opens you up. It opens you up to a whole host of possibilities. So, the way that Gene Keys works, there's 64 codes that respond to human DNA, as you know, right? And because of that, there's 64 codons. And so these are patterns that we've kind of taken and intertwined and wrapped into psychology and states of psychology so that we can open up our DNA and create an activation to be able to raise our frequency, which is based on our attitudes. So it's this transmission of consciousness that's based on astrology. So the Gene Keys is built off of astrology, the I Ching, and then human design. So they all correlate. Pretty much the main systems or modalities that people use for a higher understanding.
Mhm.
JP Morgan used astrology. Some of the greatest people in the world have used astrology. It's all tied into Gene Keys. But now you're getting a specific understanding of, hey, this is what I struggle with. This is my choice of suffering. This is what I fear most. these are my gifts. If I live here, I start to access higher levels of consciousness, but I also get to access higher levels of purpose, satisfaction, gratitude. And then this is my true essence of who I really am supposed to be. And that is more of a lifelong journey because it's almost like a Christ-like consciousness of just being a Buddha or a Yoda, type of just being. And that's a form of enlightenment that I think is very hard for anybody to attain because it requires you to give up all of who you are.
It's really, really fascinating when you talk about that. It like brings up this notion, like if you could decode information and tap into your true higher self, that alone can unleash potential with you, right? These two things that I feel so many struggle with, understanding themselves and also understanding kind of purpose and the information within them already. Because you're right, we all come with this information. And I feel like so much of what true medicine should be is just decoding that and allowing the body to heal itself, not trying to force new information into the body, which then just confuses the person on the higher self as well. When you're putting all that different information into the body. What are the types of things? Do you have any like instances of clients you've worked with that have truly transformed through the application of Gene Keys? I'm sure you have tons.
I have everybody within one session. Everybody within one session, an hour to 15, an hour and a half. And it's tough because there's a lot to swallow. But, for instance, I just started a course with a friend of mine who's a psychic medium, Candace Rebollo. And we created this course called Venus Illumination, which is about finding love within yourself through using one of the sequences in Gene Keys, which is the Venus sequence, which is all about love in your relationships. And it's a 6-week course and we're on week 2. And when I tell you that I think I've cried, the people in the course have cried more in these 2 weeks than they probably have in 5 years. It's so deep and so profound when you can get to the core of exactly why we suffer, because we all suffer. It's just the choice of suffering we choose. And when I say suffer, it's not to make it a derogatory, word, but it's a term that's used to show what we fear most and where we live in that and how we act that out. Because every time something happens to us, there's a action or a reaction that happens in the world. So when there's excessive shopping or there's excessive smoking, or you just want to be lazy, or you just want to, run and do certain things that you probably shouldn't be doing, it's because there's something happening to you that you don't know how to cope with. And that's why we're stressed. That's why there's disease. Disease is really just rooted in the core of death, the fear of dying. That's the greatest human fear. Even though you may say, I'm not afraid of death. When you really get down to the core of it, the greatest human fear is death itself.
And I saw you posted something about that. I was actually going to ask you about that because there is a lot of fear out there in the world and a lot of fear of death. And, you got to understand that in some ways it may seem logical. Like, who wants to die, right? Who wants to go through that and suffer and kind of end their life, and the possibilities of everything that could come later in life and how much more you have to it and your expectations of what life is. How do you work with people to say, there should be no fear of death. There should be no, that shouldn't hold you back from being your true self. Because I know so many people that have it, and I find it hard to connect sometimes with them and say you shouldn't have that.
There isn't anything that you can say that someone shouldn't have. Because that's all a part of their journey.
Sure.
Right? Anytime you diminish someone's feelings, it diminishes what they're supposed to learn. Right? So I always say that there's no wrong emotion to have at any time. There's no wrong anything. There's no wrong action that you can do, even though as a society, we may look at it as horrendous or despicable. There's no wrong action that anyone can do because it's all based on evolution. It's all based on the greatest reason why each and every one of us are here, which is to evolve and to evolve the human race. So when you truly understand that, you start to be gentle with yourself, right? You start to allow yourself to be more patient. And the great thing I love about Gene Keys that's very different than a lot of other, I would say, teachings is that it's very passive. And when I say passive, it's more of a self-parenting tool than this is what you need to do to change your life, right? It's more of it's poetry. It's allowing you to feel, allowing you to walk through it, allowing you to contemplate what it actually is, be patient, think about it, and then come back to it when you're ready, right? There's no, we have to do this. It has to be like this. It's when you want, where you want, and how you want it. And every time you go through something that's happening in life, a new experience, your job is really just to take that experience in and see how it applies to what you're here to learn.
Yeah. And really that act of healing or evolving or changing yourself needs to come from within. We can't listen to anybody to the true instructions, which you all try and do. We all try and have someone just tell me what I should do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that person can't. It wouldn't be your journey anymore. And that's something we like to say, even within medicine with patients. We're not giving you a treatment program that is because we feel you need it. We're trying to tap into you and ask it, and we're just decoding and passing it back to you and saying, this is what your body is asking for. It's not like a set protocol it's your protocol because it's only for you. And I feel that extends throughout life. We have to figure out how we are going to evolve and become our highest selves by ourselves, but of course, with the help of so many others.
Exactly.
But ultimately, it's through our own actions and decisions, and no one else can do that for us. So I'm vibing on this idea of it. When you start to work with someone in this realm with Gene Keys, like what are some of the first steps? What can people expect in the process itself?
So many words, but if I was going to say one thing, it would be to understand the greatest realization of you. And when I say you, I mean all parts of you. I mean why you're here. I mean what you're supposed to be doing in work, because the Gene Keys goes through your life's work into your purpose. And that's combined with what keeps you healthy and what you're here to learn, right? So there's 11 different Gene Keys within your hologenetic profile, we call it. So it's kind of like a profile. You can go to genekeys.com and download your free profile, and it'll show you right away what your life's work is, your purpose is, what you're here to learn, and what keeps you healthy. But once you move through that, then we get into relationships, right? Which are the most vital part of all life. And so we go from, your purpose, which goes directly into your attraction, which is what you're here to learn emotionally, right? What magnetizes you, what makes you magnetic. And that's probably one of the biggest parts for me that I've learned is the emotional side, right? Of how I've lived my life. And, when we look at it, the emotional incarnation in your body is really, or how you see the world, I should say, is really from 7 to 14.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So a lot of times when I'm working with clients, a lot of the answers that come to dealing with those emotional traumas or those situations or why they're doing certain things currently today goes back to that time period, 7 to 14. So it's really fascinating to see that. But then it goes into your IQ and your EQ, which is what makes up your intelligence, right? How can you be more intelligent? And then it goes into your work. It goes into the pearl, which is all about what makes you prosperous. And prosperous has nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with allowing you to live your greatest purpose, right? And so it shows you what you should be doing for your vocation, what type of work, what type of person are you in the work that you're doing. And so it really encompasses I'd say it's the all-encompassing kind of formula as to why you're here. And you get to see in each one of those aspects where you really struggle. And we sit in those emotions. We figure out, why are you dealing with them? During our course right now, Venus Illumination, we're doing something called psychic somatics, which is just getting into the body. Somatics is of the body. So we're getting into the body and we're allowing people to work through those emotions on their own. And so I've never seen some of the things that I've seen. This is the first time Gene Keys has ever been combined with something like this. And I'm seeing profound shifts like I've never seen before in my life. And this is literally the first time we did it. So, in a year or two, I can't imagine the type of effects that this type of work is going to be having on people, because it's truly better than anything that I've ever gone through. And I've gone through, so many great things in my life, but it just gets you to the core of exactly what you need right now.
Yeah. It sounds absolutely fascinating. And it really echoes a lot of what I truly believe is that idea of healing, that it starts more on this very high level plane, spiritual, energetic, mental, all of these things you could say. Whereas most of us start at that lower vibrating field of the physical and try and work up from there. Which is like an upstream battle a lot of times, right?
It is.
And
It totally is.
you have to realize we are not physical beings living a kind of spiritual, but we are spiritual beings in a physical reality of it, in these vessels of our bodies, and enjoying the ride in the universe. Are you using this work within Lockett performance training? Is this all like a holistic viewpoint? Like, talk a little bit about that Lockett performance training and what goes on there.
Yeah. So Lockett Performance Training is the youth academy that I created for high school football players. And so, we've probably got about 40 kids through there because we work with them independently and collectively. But it's a very robust training period that allows them to, essentially, when I left football, I kept getting called back to coaching and I kept running from it. I was like, I don't want to coach. I don't want to, my brother's a coach at Oregon. And I'm like, that's not my path. And eventually I was like, you know what? I keep calling back. I'm supposed to be working with young men. So let me create a NFL caliber type program for young men in high school, from the recruiting to the film analysis, to actual training, to nutrition, the whole nine, and then also mindset. And so the performance coaching, we don't necessarily get into Gene Keys because these guys are, high school. They're thinking about ladies and everything else, So, Gene Keys is a bit over their head right now. But it's so interesting when you hear a 15-year-old talk to you like he's 22, right? Because these kids are extremely intelligent. They may not have lived as much of life that we've lived, but the intelligence that these kids have these days is truly profound. But it's also interesting, and I'm an analyzer. If you can't tell, I'm always looking for patterns and things that stick out. And it's so interesting because I have a lot of private school kids, but I also have public school kids, and the emotional intellect from the private school kids is almost twofold of what I see on the public side. And so, the next thing, I'm sure that this will happen down the line at some point. The next thing I really want to impact is education, because the ability to be able to process and learn and understand information. I see how people struggle in testing. All my private school kids, 3.9s, 4.0s, and their testings are off the chart. Their ACT scores, their SAT scores are off the chart. When I look at, some of these public school kids, they're nowhere even close. And so the comparison as well as the gap is extremely wide for kids going through the same systems, pretty much, right? So there's a huge transition that needs to happen in education, and I think we're slowly but surely coming out of that and being pulled together. But Lockett Performance is really all about helping these kids get to a level of football that they probably would never ever get to without the help of myself and my staff. So we love what we do, and we make it fun, we make it exciting, and we just keep guys motivated to keep playing football at a high level.
I love it. And it's always funny that way. The universe is always kind of laughing at us. It's like the things we run away from, we probably have to do the most. It was probably somewhere in you that you knew you had to go back to coaching football and all that and pay it forward and everything.
Exactly.
What's on the horizon with you? What are you looking at? You've obviously, dipped your toe in so many different things and learned so much out there. Is there anything now you're starting to look at, or maybe even excited about as you continue to research and see the patterns of what life is about?
Yeah, there's so much that fascinates me. Actually, Stephen Kotler talks about this thing called the passion formula, which was the initial thing that got me into doing more performance coaching, which is finding 5 passions you have in the world or curiosities, and then coupling them with 5 things that you see wrong or that you want to fix with the world, and then seeing where those 5 intersect. And, 3-4 years ago when I did that, it was very different to today, but knowing what I know and going through, certifications in breath work and, most of the spirituality and the teachings and the people who are involved in this are women, because it's coming through the feminine. It's the creativity, it's the flow, it's the allowing. The masculine is the structure, right? And so when I'm doing breathwork classes or when I'm going through these trainings, it's all women. And you get to learn something extremely powerful that I don't think enough men actually know how to do, which is hold space for a woman. But, even more so, you get to understand the world of, or I should say, how women live in the world. And it's truly rooted in fear, because the feminine has been repressed since the beginning of time. Because since the beginning of time, everything was based off of brute strength. So if I was stronger than you, then I controlled you. And today's the first time that we're now seeing that sort of duality kind of counterbalance and come back into phase where women are doing almost just as well as most men, and a lot of women are doing better than men. And they're having a problem dealing with living in the masculine, but also still being feminine. But they're also still in a perpetual state of fear. I remember I was talking to a woman and she was like, you don't understand what it's like to walk to a car. When I walk to a car in a parking lot, I have my keys out. I may have pepper spray. I'm constantly looking around. I'm looking to see if there's anybody in my car before I get into it, because I'm always alert, because I have to be as a woman. And, then, while I was going through, teacher training, which is, through Curtis's, his event to get certified, I've spoken it probably 2 or 3 times. And then I actually went through the training myself. And again, it's like 95% women. And there's an exercise that he does where, I don't want to talk too much about it, but we go into a cave and, it's a dark cave and we all have to spill out secrets that we probably wouldn't tell anybody. And, out of all of the secrets that are here, the things that people talk about, it all has to do with some sort of trauma from a male to a woman, to a female, right? Whether it's sexual trauma, a lot of the times it is, or it's just, physical abuse, mental abuse, whatever it may be. And so I started working with women after this. I got into relationship coaching. I got into love coaching with women because I understand the process and I also understand them at a very high level. I understand why they don't love, but I also understand how to help them find intimacy. I understand how to help them find the man that can give them that and what that man has to look like and what he has to do. And a lot of times we limit what we want, or we devalue who we are because of the situations that we've gone through. And that's nothing to do with who it is that we truly are, but it comes down to our standards. It comes down to what we're willing to accept and not accept in our life. And a lot of people accept a lot of things because, like you said earlier, Casper, we don't want to be alone. Mm-hmm. Right. So I'm in a relationship where I'm living with a guy and I don't want to be with him, but I'm afraid to let him go. Or I'm dating a guy that I know is not really my forever guy, but I have kids and he's good to my kids and they love him. Right. And so we create this, especially women, their mind is very complex. Men, we're very simple. We like straightforward. Women are going to shoot you 20 different ways. And you got to make things simple for them. And if you can make it simple, but you can help them get to the core root of why they're dealing with what they're dealing with. And a lot of times it has to do with the way they were brought up. Mm-hmm. Oh, my mother lied to me about my dad not being around. She hid that from me for 25 years. And so then I had to sneak behind her to go find my dad. Right. And then you're sneaking around in your relationship right now. So like all these things correlate. You get to see them play out. And for me, it's truly fascinating, but as well, it's a deep purpose for me to be able to help women and men. Right now it's women, but eventually I think it's going to stem out to men. Mm-hmm. I just think that more men need to be ready to have these conversations, because we don't want to change until, our lady says, I want to break up, or I'm not happy, or, this isn't what it used to be. Now all of a sudden we want to change. We want to go to the gym, right? We want to get a better job. Want to start, you like my, okay, I'm going to shave my face since you right? Since you don't like facial hair, right? We forget, right? Especially as men, we get broken up with, and all of a sudden it's like, I'm going to the gym 5 days a week. I'm shredded. I'm on all these supplements and meditating. I'm doing all these things, but it's like when you get into the relationship, all of that stops. And as men, we have to understand that we're that container for women to thrive. And that container, the number one thing for a relationship to thrive outside of just communication for a man to a woman, is to be able to create a safe space. Mm. Because if she doesn't feel safe, she's going to create an excuse for why she doesn't feel safe. And she's never going to tell you, I don't feel safe. She's going to say, you're not making enough money. She's going to say, you're not giving me enough attention. She's going to say, you're spending too much time at work. When it's really none of those things, it's because you haven't created a safe space and you're not providing what she truly needs on an emotional level. So I try to peel back the layer for women as well as, through content and I'm going to be starting up a podcast in 2024, but giving that insight to men so that they understand how to be with a better woman, right? How to deal with, as men, we're attracted based on looks. That's what it comes down to. After looks, then we can get somewhere, right? But if it doesn't look right, we're not going to be there. You know what I mean? That just doesn't happen. So
we are
it's like,
still men at our core. Yes.
We're still men. We're still men, and women need to know that too, because there's too many women walking around here thinking that I can just be like this and attract the man that I want. And it's like, listen, you're beautiful, but you can't just, walk around and act like men you just wear sweats every day. That doesn't work. Men aren't going to find you attractive. And so just balancing out that dynamic between men and women is really the passion for me. And, we'll see where it goes. I'm just excited to be able to live in this vein.
Oh, absolutely. And it is that yin and yang. It is the balance of life. Everything has the feminine and the masculine, and it's required of both. You can't have too much of one or the other. That's sort of what we understand is this homeostasis of even health, or the balancing of all these different energies. So it's great that you're working to find that balance and have people be their introspective sense and find that within themselves.
Thank you.
Where can people learn more about you and work with you, Bret?
Best place is probably Instagram. You can go there, Bret_Lockett. I know a lot of people, pretty much everybody has an Instagram. I'm also on Facebook, and I'll have a website. My website's down right now. Will be back up by the new year, but it's BretLockett.com. But Instagram is probably the best way to find me, see some content, understand what it is I do. Feel free to reach out. I'm very active on there, and I'm always happy to help people any way I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for your work, for this amazing discussion, enlightening discussion here today.
Yeah, likewise, Casper.
Wishing you all the best in the future, my man.
Yeah, thank you. Same to you.
Be sure to check out Bret on Instagram for more information and work with him. And until next time, continue writing your own healing story.